But I mean, like, the Macedonians have the rare distinction of, like, within the universe of, like, jokes about former Yugoslav nationalities, they have no negative stereotype, really.
So are they just out
I mean,
of the
what?
jokes?
That they're mild, that they're, like, you know, fun-loving or something. Like, it's they like music.
Just reasonable
Like,
people, yeah.
Yeah, like everybody, you know what, you know, Montenegrins are lazy, Bosnians are stupid, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, Serbs are what, proud, something like this.
Like, but yeah, Macedonians are just, you know, whatever. They're there having a good time. And, you know, killing each other brutally over VMRO for decades.
Yeah, I think people would be shocked by this history.
Got it out of their system, I guess.
That's it. I hope so. You ready, Ray? Are you ready?
Ja, welcome
All
to
right.
the Empire Never Ended.
Ja, welcome. Willkommen. Welcome to the Empire Never Ended. I'm Fritz. There's Boris. I see Ray, but you don't see any of us. It's a matter of faith, guys.
The mystery continues.
So, speaking of mysteries, Ray just went headlong into an extremely complicated topic. So, like, props to Ray right off the bat for whatever's going to happen here.
Yeah, you know it's going to be something interesting when Ray sends a message to the group chat being like, these are maybe the craziest guys that we've covered yet in this which,
I mean, they
says
definitely,
something.
I think they're the most hardcore group that we covered so far, just in the sense how long they lasted for decades and how very militant they were and how like insane number of different factions they had. It's very interesting.
So who are we talking about then, Ray?
Well, we're talking about, this is also like not an easy thing to say because I said a group, but this is like, it's like almost like a tradition, more accurately you could say, call it like that, because
it's not a good way to put it.
It's not one group, it's a series like of groups that succeed each other, or some even exist parallel to each other or are basically killing each other. But the easiest way to refer to them is just saying VMRO. So what I'm saying now is the letters VMRO, which is the acronym in Bulgarian, Macedonian, and languages for the Vnatрешна Македонска революционерна организация, which means the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization. So the acronym in English would be IMRO, but I'm just going to call them VMRO because this is how people call them in the Balkans. So it's we will call them that, but they didn't call themselves that through the decades that they existed. They often changed their name. It was mostly some variation of that, and since the 20s it was only that. But in the 19th century and early 20th century, it was usually sometimes very close to it, but not quite that. There were slight variations on it. Sometimes they would also they had separate organizations for different regions, because mostly their activities are concentrated on Macedonia, but not exclusively on Macedonia. There is like other regions with Slavic majority in Ottoman Empire. The most prominent other region where these organizations are active is the Western Thrace region around the town of Edrane, which in Bulgarian and Macedonian is called Odrin. So usually this is called something like Odrinska Oblast or Odrin region by them. So they had a separate organization for this region as well. But yeah, it's
and that's in modern day Turkey, to be clear, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
So I mean, so Macedonia is also an interesting region, also very complicated in terms of identity and who lives there and how they identify and what neighboring countries think about it. Everyone has an issue with it, apparently.
Macedonia is a Greece.
Yes. So Macedonia today, there is an independent country which is now, until since very recently, called the Republic of Northern Macedonia. This historically was called Vardar Macedonia, Macedonia around the Vardar River. This is the region that in 1913 became a part of Serbia, and in 1918 a part of the monarchist Yugoslavia, and then in the socialist Yugoslavia became a republic, one of the Yugoslav republics, and was kind of recognized, got its statehood recognized as a federal subject of the Yugoslav Socialist Federation. Then there is
sorry, just right out the bat.
Yeah.
Right out the bat, we're hitting listeners with what? Did you just name 6 different states? I think.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's very complicated. This is the most simplified version I have here. Really.
Yeah,
and
no,
then,
yeah.
Yeah. So there are 3 main parts of Macedonia. So that's one. The other is the part that it's in Bulgaria. It's called Pirin Macedonia. And then the third one is Aegean Macedonia, which is now northern Greece. And the biggest city there is the second city in Greece by population, Salonika or Thessaloniki. So what is this movement? This is also not very easy to say. Historically, it's very tied to Bulgaria and Bulgarian nationalism.
Mm-hmm.
And it's inspired by an older organization which was called the Internal Revolutionary Organization, and which was founded in 1869. It existed until 1871. And this was a Bulgarian national liberation organization headed by a guy called Vasil Levski. So they basically fought for liberating Bulgaria against the Turkish occupation, and was kind of inspired by the typical 19th century nationalist, liberal, democratic ideas of the time by figures like Garibaldi and so on. But it's an important organization because it kind of, in its structure and its name, obviously, it influenced VMRO, which came later.
Mm-hmm.
In structure, in sense of it's a nationalist, a secret nationalist revolutionary organization organized in cells, committees, and so on, and which embraces armed struggle in different forms, as we'll see. So the more kind of proper VMRO, really, the one that kind of is the start of this tradition that we're talking about, starts in 1893. And it's founded in Salonika, so in today's Greece, which at that time had a Slavic majority.
It was kind of split Slavic and Jewish, right? Greeks made up a very small part of the population.
Yes.
Yeah, so if anybody's keeping score, the Internal Macedonian Revolutionary Organization was started by some Bulgarians in Greece.
Exactly.
Yes.
By some Slavic Macedonians who definitely at the time also adopted Bulgarian identity.
Yeah.
But it's very interesting because what they want an autonomy for Macedonia in the beginning in the Ottoman Empire. And they also say that everyone who lives in Macedonia is a Macedonian. They see it as a kind of a multi-ethnic local cultural identity.
Everyone?
Yeah, everyone. And they explicitly also say that they want Muslims to be a part of their future autonomous region or something like this. And then this evolves into this idea of an independent Macedonian state, which will be a part of a Balkan federation.
Yeah.
So in this period, like I said earlier, in the 1860s, 70s, these ideas were mostly influenced by liberal nationalist tradition. Now already in the end of the 19th century, you have some influence of socialist ideas here as well, which I'll briefly talk about. So it's interesting because they have many of them Bulgarian identity, but they only see that as one part of a larger Macedonian identity, and they explicitly state that they don't want to be a tool of the Bulgarian state. They want something different from themselves. which is kind of
Interesting.
it's very interesting because it's a nationalist movement in many ways, a kind of a classical 19th century nationalist movement, but they have some ideas that are a bit different because they want kind of some kind of national identity that consists out of different identities, and this evolves through times and kind of different factions of VMRO are formed around how exactly they see this identity.
Well, because I mean that region was not very ethnically homogenous. No, I mean you had all these different identities, probably much more than in Bulgaria proper, or in
you
the
had
rest of
like
Greece
people who identify mostly with Bulgaria. You had who were the majority. We also had a lot of Albanians, Greeks, Jewish people, a lot of Vlach people who are like kind of native Roman-speaking Balkan people. So all kinds of people living there. And so VMRO wants all of them to be a part of their organization. So they embrace guerrilla tactics, and they organize what they call Chetniks, which today is kind of synonymous with Serbian nationalism, but original Chetniks were these VMRO people. And they explicitly call them Chetniks. They also call the leader of a Cheta or a Chetnik detachment. They call this guy a voivoda. Same like Serbs later adopt. And so that's that. Occasionally they dabble in a little bit of terrorism as well. So a lot of this this to some degree also has to do is connected to church politics. There is like a kind of
let's throw that in there, sure.
There is a kind of group institution with a kind of a strange name. It sounds like something from Star Trek because they're called the Bulgarian Exarchy, or let's say, or something.
I saw that word pop up. I had to look that up.
So that's basically the Bulgarian Orthodox Church, but it was founded in the late 19th century in a non-canonical way, basically by the Turkish Sultan, who decreed, we'll now have an independent Bulgarian church. So this was, of course, not recognized by the Constantinople Patriarch, the big guy in Orthodoxy. And so they existed until like the end of the Second World War under this name of Bulgarian Exarchy or Exarchia, when they were finally recognized by the Patriarch of Constantinople as the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. But what this meant in the conditions of the Turkish occupation was they had certain privileges, so they could have their own bishops and open churches and have schools in Bulgarian and so on. So this was also kind of used as a way to make Macedonian like Slavic people into proper Bulgarians as they saw it at the time and so on. So some VMRO people were kind of attached to these politics as well at the time. Some of them, not all of them, because VMRO is always a kind of heterogeneous group. But for example, at a certain point in, I think, 1897, the Serbian church also gets some privileges from the Turkish state, which means they open their own churches, and then they start to like try to make these Slavic people into Serbs and so on. And so some of the VMRO people don't like this, so they utilize some of their terrorist tactics against like local Serb like officials or prominent people, and they start assassinating them.
But what didn't they like about it? Because they did the same thing, but first?
I mean, they were kind of, they saw that as a kind of Serbian imperialist politics in there. But many of them, as I said, it's a paradoxical. Many of them have this idea of autonomous Macedonia, but also have some Bulgarian identity. It's a bit complicated. So a lot of strange things happen there. There's like a repression of the Turkish state against VMRO. There's also like foreign elements there, like Greek, Serbian, connected to their states and so on. So, for example, one incident happened in 1897 in the town called Vinica, when like Bulgarian robbers from Bulgaria like robbed and killed like a local Turk who was like a wealthy man, and in this process they also killed a member of VMRO. And then the guys, like the VMRO guy's wife, thought that he was killed by other VMRO people because these people came from Bulgaria there.
Okay.
So I guess, I don't know exactly for what reason, maybe because she seeked revenge or was scared or whatever, she kind of informed the authorities about the bunch of guns they have in their house.
This is like a Coen Brothers film.
And this led to a huge campaign of repression that had like 600 people arrested, 200 tortured, and 300 escaped to Bulgaria, and like dozens of them got like lengthy prison sentences, like from 10 years until like to life sentences. And this is like only one such incident. There were many. By the way, they were pardoned in 1902 when the Young Turks were in power. The Young Turk regime was in power in Greece, and some of VMRO people had some connections with the Young Turks and were allied with them at some points, had some common plans and so on. I'm not going to go into that. But yeah, that also happened. So there was like heavy repression. They were like, they were both into guerrilla stuff, terrorist stuff, and suffered heavy repression. So
they actually self-identified as terrorists, right? If I'm not mistaken,
many of them did.
They use that term.
Yes,
like we are.
Yeah,
terrorists.
I'll mention that a little bit.
Yeah.
So one of the most important event in this period is this the Ilinden uprising. So Ilinden is it's an Orthodox holiday, and the uprising happened in August of 1903. But just before I mention that, I want to say that one of the prominent leaders of VMRO at that time, or this kind of national liberation movement in Macedonia, was a guy called Goce Delchev, who was a kind of a charismatic leader of this movement, and he was also a socialist. So this is like, he was the most prominent leader and a socialist, and he apparently had like this kind of close collaborator who was called Mikhail Gergikov, who was apparently an anarchist. So there was also some anarchist ideas in how Goce Delchev proposed to solve the Macedonian question.
They had that whole like the boatmen of Thessaloniki, right?
I will mention that as well.
Okay.
There are socialist, even some apparently anarchist or libertarian socialist ideas there, but all in this context of kind of some national liberation movement. So how legitimately you can call that anarchist? I mean, it's a big debate.
Sure.
So in this, but Goce Delchev, he dies. He's killed. He's also a Chetnik, like a leader of a Chetnik detachment, and he's killed, I think, in battle in the same year when the uprising happens, but before it, I think in the beginning of 1903, and the uprising happens in August of 1903. It happens in a town called Kruševo, and they proclaim their Kruševo Republic, which is sometimes referred to as the first republic in the Balkans. And it basically has some like kind of libertarian socialist ideas there. But it lasts only for 10 days. It's crushed by the Turkish army, by 20,000 Turkish soldiers.
Yeah, that'll do it. Yeah.
But it also it's also a start of a much bigger uprising that happens in a huge area from, the Ohrid Lake to the Black Sea. And it lasts like from August until the end of October of 1903. So there's a lot of fighting there. Ultimately, the movement is defeated, but it starts a new wave of guerrilla fights and Chetnik detachments in this area. But in this concrete occasion, more than 20,000 houses were burned down. More than 100 villages were completely destroyed, like wiped off the map. 70,000 people were homeless. 30,000 people left Macedonia. 9,000 were killed. It was a really big deal. Also, after the uprising in 1903, there are more irregular paramilitary detachments sent from Bulgaria, Serbia, and Greece to the region. I guess they kind of learned and were inspired by what VMRO was doing. So this is when, the Serbs start their own Chetnik organization, basically inspired by the example of VMRO. This defeat also produces one of many internal splits in VMRO in this movement. And they're kind of split in two factions that at the time are called a reformist and a conservative faction. And I think in 1908, the conservative faction wins, let's say, at the Chiustendil Congress of VMRO. And after that, they start having even closer relations with Bulgaria and aligning themselves with Bulgaria, but still preserving their autonomy, still with this idea of Bulgarian autonomy. So this is also, I'll talk about these different kind of views of, Macedonian autonomy, not Bulgarian autonomy.
Yeah. I wasn't sure if I should ask or not.
Yeah.
I could believe either one.
So, this is also kind of the beginning of this. We can start to talk about the kind of the left wing and the right wing position inside of this broad movement. And what is characteristic for the left wing is that they have a more kind of more concrete idea of an independent Macedonia as a part of Balkan Federation.
Like a future.
This is why often they are called federalists. On the other hand, you have these more kind of ambiguous right-wing people who have this idea of an autonomy for Macedonia that is not always very well defined. And this is why often they are called autonomists. But they are closer to Bulgarian state interests.
So autonomy in this case would imply like autonomy within some sort of Bulgaria. Right?
This is not always clear. Like this is maybe one possible interpretation, but there are like you will see this also both ideas evolve in different directions, as we'll see.
I read some quote from someone from the early organization, and I guess they were asked in an interview much later about what was the answer to the Bulgarian question, and the guy was like, I'm not sure, I think it had something to do with autonomy or something we would figure out later, but like this dude didn't even know. It's
I wonder who that was, because there is like an interview on the internet with one old guy, and he's the worst bastard in all of this.
Oh yeah?
Yes. I don't know if that's
Maybe
him.
It was him. I don't know.
Yeah. I'll talk about him. He's an interesting character, but in a way that is interesting for us, which is not a good sign.
No.
Yeah, that's always a bad sign.
Yeah.
So this kind of so the conservative kind of more pro-Bulgarian faction wins, and this even more escalates during the Balkan Wars and especially during the First World War. So First Balkan War happens in 1912, second one in 1913. This is when Serbia occupies basically Vardar, Macedonia, and it becomes part of Serbia. So in this period, a lot of VMRO people kind of wage war against Serbian Chetnik detachments and Serbian army, really, allied with the Bulgarian army. And in this whole process, there is a guy called Todor Alexandrov who emerges as a new leader of VMRO. And he's closely connected with Bulgaria. He's a Chetnik. You can see a lot of photos with him as looking as a typical kind of Chetnik, romantic rebel.
Is he the bastard you were mentioning a second ago?
No. There is a much worse guy.
Yeah, because this guy sucks.
Yeah, he's not great, but the other guy is much worse.
All right.
They also have an uprising now called Tikveš uprising in 1913, which is an uprising against Serbian authorities, which they see as occupiers in Vardar, Macedonia. It has like some of the voivodas from the Ilinden uprising participating in it together, supposedly with Bulgarian army against the Serbs. It fails. It's crushed by now the Serbian Chetniks and army. And after that, there is also repression now by the Serbian state. So more than 500 people are killed, more than 600 houses are burned down, and so on. At this period, these VMRO detachments also start making deals with Albanian guerrilla rebels like the Kačaci. So they also sometimes attack Serbia or Greece from Albania together with its Albanian fighters. So this also happens. During the war, this is not only supported by Bulgaria, but also by Austro-Hungary. These kind of
I'd imagine that modern Macedonian nationalists don't like talking about that relation with Albanian guerrillas, huh?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what I would like to talk about if I was a Macedonian or Bulgarian nationalist or any nationalist here, because this is like really, it's very hard to make any sense of this. A lot of stuff happens, and you'll see. It's a pretty amazing story. So this kind of close involvement with Bulgaria evolves even more. during the First World War, because VMRO, led by this guy Alexandrov, basically stops existing temporarily, and they become the 11th Macedonian division of the Bulgarian army. Really.
All right.
And
okay. So the question of Bulgarian autonomy decided.
Yeah. Yes.
Yes. We
For
are integrated. All right.
Yes. He commands about 30,000 people apparently there. And he also becomes a kind of an intelligence officer for Bulgaria. And he's like closely allied with Axis forces, and he apparently gets a bunch of German medals and things like this. But of course, something happens, and that is that, Bulgaria loses the war, and immediately after the war has a new government by this guy called Alexander Stamboliski, who is pro-Allied and even pro-Yugoslav, and is saying that, people who got us into this war on the side of the Axis have to pay in some way. And there is a rumor even that lists of politicians who were on the side of the Axis forces are compiled to be arrested. And at that time, Alexandrov and his VMRO organization, also this other guy who is very important leader called Protogerov, they basically go to the Bulgarian part of Macedonia, the part of Macedonia, the Pirin part, which is in Bulgaria, and they become kind of a state inside of a Bulgarian state there.
Yeah.
And are hostile to the central Bulgarian government. I'll talk a little bit about this later on. So that part of VMRO is now a state inside of a Bulgarian state which is the smallest region of Macedonia which exists in Bulgaria. But this is kind of the right wing part of VMRO. At the same time, there are people who kind of were marginalized by them, who were more identifying with those ideas of a Balkan Federation and some socialist ideas. And they exist the whole time, and they have many different groups. Like one is called the Ilinden organization, named after the uprising, but the most prominent one is called the Macedonian Federal Organization. They're often, all of these people are called federalists. It's quite clear why, I kind of explain. And they exist mostly abroad. So they are like emigre revolutionaries connected to socialist revolutionary circles.
Now,
and so
when
on.
you say abroad, what does that mean? Like,
I'm not exactly sure. Like, there are some local alliances that sometimes they make, like for pragmatic reasons, like with Yugoslavia. Sometimes they live in Yugoslavia, but I think like also Western Europe. I think. So now, after the First World War, these people also kind of start their own VMRO, which is, we can basically call it Federalist VMRO, which exists as a kind of an armed wing of the Macedonian Federal Organization.
All right.
Which exists parallel to this right wing, let's call it VMRO, headed by this Alexandrov guy and Protogerov in Bulgaria.
The guys with the mini state.
Yeah. So, and they are like true to the cause of Balkan Federation and independent Macedonia as a part of it, which will be a multi-ethnic country with many people still have a Bulgarian identity amongst their leaders, but they don't want to be a tool of the Bulgarian state or their nationalism and imperialism. They want their own thing there. So they organize their own kind of armed detachments. They have their own Chetniks, which also exist in all three parts of Macedonia.
Okay.
And
so these are the left-wing Chetniks.
Yes, they are left-wing
Let's
Chetniks.
introduce left-wing Chetniks to the show. Let's throw them in too.
Because why not?
Why not?
Left-wing Macedonian Bulgarian Chetniks.
Yeah, we've had all kinds of Chetniks now. I think we did it.
So they're fighting the Alexandrov wing of VMRO, who's also all the emigre kind of leaders of VMRO are against him. They do not support this guy.
Sorry, I have to ask because it's them, but are these, by fighting, do you mean like politically or do you mean like...
No, fighting. Like
street fights, battles?
Yes.
Okay, all right.
So the prime minister of Bulgaria is this guy, Alexander Stamboliski, that I mentioned. He's also kind of an interesting guy. He has his own party, in a way, ideology. His party is called something like the Bulgarian Agrarian National Union. That's so he's the head of an agrarian movement, which is a kind of usually seen as a left-wing socialist agrarian movement. He has some ideas how he wants to run the state, which are very different from like normal liberal democratic. Sometimes there are some say even some like maybe corporatist fascist elements there, but he is like very pro-allied, and he cooperates with communists. There is at the time there is a strong communist party in Bulgaria. They're kind of allied with each other, and he's a strong enemy of VMRO, and he wants good relations with Yugoslavia. At some point, he even says that he's a Yugoslav, and that he wants Bulgaria to be a part of some kind of federal Yugoslavia. So you can see there are some like similarities here with these kind of more left VMRO ideas about some Balkan Federation or something like this. So naturally he becomes an ally of the federalist VMRO, and they're also Chetnik detachments, and he wants them to crush the other VMRO, but they are not successful in it. And in what kind of buries him is in 1923 he signs an agreement with Yugoslavia called the Niš Agreement.
Yeah.
And this agreement says that he recognizes the sovereignty of Yugoslavia, of Vardar, in the area of Vardar, Macedonia. And he also allows the Yugoslav army to fight the right-wing VMRO, even in the territory formerly controlled by Bulgaria, but really controlled by VMRO. Because they are attacking Yugoslavia from there, and he's not able to control them, so he allows Yugoslavs to do it themselves. So in June of 1923, a coup d'etat happens in Bulgaria.
One of several, right?
Perennial.
This it is led by right-wing and military circles, especially a group called the Military Alliance or Military Union. It's a kind of a secretive right-wing authoritarian.
That's what it sounds like. Yeah.
Yes, of officers. So they are not allies of VMRO, but for this occasion they are, and they actually capture the Prime Minister Stamboliski, and they hand him over to VMRO, who kidnaps him, tortures him. They cut off his hand that he signed the Niš agreement with, and I
corny
think
and horrible.
Yes, I think they blind him. They're really kind of
some Old Testament ass shit.
Damn.
And then they murder
Wikipedia
him.
It just says assassinated.
Yeah.
It's not quite the right word, is it?
Yeah.
Good Lord.
So they murder him. Also, so this is now a period after the war in which Alexandrov, who kind of emerged as a leader of VMRO during the war, he consolidates his control over this right-wing VMRO. And he does that by murdering other people who are potential leaders. There's a lot of assassinations there and things like this.
Purge.
Yes.
In this period, they are still supportive of the kind of Chetnik guerrilla fighting, but they also start to move more and more towards terrorist actions.
Oh, good. Okay. Usually people say, but they start to move more and more towards electoral directions.
No.
But no, they're fine with the guerrilla fighting. They just want to add terrorism.
Yes.
Bring on the terror. Yeah.
Okay.
They slowly start to prefer terror instead of just guerrilla fighting. So
it's more fun, I guess.
Well, you also survive it more. I mean, like guerrilla fighting, I mean.
Yeah. And for mostly because of he wanted to get rid of like the competition. So they started killing people in all areas of Macedonia, but also throughout Bulgaria and also abroad. And the killings were usually done by in the daylight, publicly, just to demonstrate their power and so on. But they still continue to do like guerrilla actions at the time, and in this period from 1923 1924, like in Vardar Macedonia, or the Yugoslav part of Macedonia, there are like 53 Chetnik detachments with more than 3,000 Chetniks. When like 79 voivodas, and there are like more than 100 battles between them and the Serbian army, and 73 terrorist attacks.
I mean, this is not a very particularly large territory we're talking about here. I mean, even today, the modern population is like under 2 million, right?
Yeah,
so it's about 2 million, like a third of which is Albanian, right? So like,
and compressed into what time span?
this is a year, like maybe 2 years.
That's a year in like a tiny, tiny territory.
Yes.
Fuck.
So effectively, the Yugoslav state is not exercising very much control, probably outside of like Skopje or something. Right?
Absolute chaos.
So during this coup d'état in Bulgaria, the biggest ally of the agrarian party and the prime minister was supposed to be the Communist Party, but they were not active. They didn't defend the prime minister and very passive. They only decided to do their own kind of uprising in September of that year, but this was too late. It was not only communist, it was also anarchist and like these agrarians, but they kind of failed in their uprising. And in this period, the VMRO were killing communists and other people who were supportive of these uprisings, although they were also against the new government as well. So they were not allied with the new government. It was only like an ally, like a very pragmatic one. They also didn't like them as well. Okay, but it's interesting. So at the same time, so VMRO, this right-wing VMRO is kind of killing communists, but they at the same time start thinking maybe we want good relations with the Soviet Union. So because they want some support, I guess, in like as revolutionaries to get some arms and finance and whatever. And they contact the Comintern, and the Comintern says that, okay, fine, we can support you, but you have to create a united Macedonian National Revolutionary Organizations, stop the infighting, and like you have to meet all of these leftist VMRO people and make one organization, and we'll support you. So, and this leads to an attempt to do that in 1924. So there are meetings between all of these, like the federalists that I mentioned, who have their own federalist VMRO, who were before they're killing each other with these right-wing VMRO people. Now they're meeting each other, and also with the communist, the Bulgarian Communist Party, and they create a manifesto in 1924, which is called the May Manifesto, which basically adopts all of this left-wing federalist politics. They say, okay, we want an independent Macedonia that will be a multi-ethnic region and a part of a Balkan federation, and also will be a member organization of the Balkan Communist Federation, which was an alliance of the communist parties from the Balkans, which was aligned with the Comintern, the Communist International, controlled by the Soviet Union. All of this happens. And Alexandrov signs this thing, but then kind of has some second thoughts and retracts his signature. Or
he said it was like a forgery or some shit.
Denies that he ever made it. And then the Communist Party, I guess to discredit him, they publish the full text of the May Manifesto. Then a bunch of infighting happens in VMRO, which means killing each other. And it results in Alexander himself getting killed in 1924.
About time. I mean,
it's a mystery who killed him. Like everyone says, it's not completely clear. There were so many like factions and killing that it's not really clear who did it.
Yeah.
But what this means, that this is now the time for the biggest bastard to shine, and this is this guy called Ivan Mihailov. Or usually better known as Vancho Mihailov, who becomes the new leader of the right-wing VMRO in Bulgaria, or in Pirin region of Macedonia, which is in Bulgaria. So everything that was kind of characteristic for right-wing VMRO before that now is like intensified a lot. So this guy is really into terrorism. He doesn't. He's not supportive of Chetnik guerrilla fighting at all. In fact, he orders the Chetniks to shave their beards and to wear civilian clothes and to do terrorism, basically. And so,
well, what were they like bombing? Like what?
They were assassinating enemies. A lot of them. So he is also not completely recognized as a leader at the beginning, because this other guy that I mentioned called Protogerov, he's still alive, and he has his own faction of the right-wing VMRO. So right-wing VMRO at this point has at least two factions. One is the head is this guy Mihailov. The other is headed by this old ally of Alexandrov, which is called Protogerov, who is still into guerrilla fighting, and he's like the pro-Chetnik wing of the right-wing VMRO. And Vancho Mihailov, he's the head of this kind of pro-terrorist wing, and he's like a ruthless guy who just is killing everyone.
Is this what passes now for an ideological struggle in the VMRO?
It seems so, yeah.
Wow. Fuck.
So he's focused on terrorism. Chetniks need to shave their beards, wear civilian clothes. It's easy to kill people like that. And they start killing a lot of people. Like he kills left-wing VMRO people. He kills people in his own VMRO that are in a competing faction, or he just doesn't like them for some reason.
Good God.
And he wipes out the whole kind of intellectual wing of VMRO.
All right.
Just kills them, all of them.
Jesus.
They also kind of do this like publicly in broad daylight. They just kill someone and that's it. He's secretly supported by the Bulgarian state because they want to destroy VMRO. They think this is a good guy to do it, basically. And also they want to control all of these emigre national revolutionaries who this guy is also kind of killing because he organizes assassinations also abroad. Now in their own region of like Macedonian region of Bulgaria, they have their own tax system. They have their own banks, and they amass such an amount of money that they basically create their own army there, like a real one in Bulgaria. And he manages to kill his biggest competitor, this guy Protogerov. And after that, the Protogerov faction still exists, and there is like a fight with them, and more than 100 people are killed in this. This clash with the Protogerov faction of the right-wing VMRO. At the same time, he's also utilizing terror tactics in the now Greek and Yugoslav parts of Macedonia against state officials and so on. A lot of civilians die there as well when they plant bombs and so on. By the way, both the Federalist, the one that doesn't exist anymore, VMRO, which was left-wing, at times was supported by the Yugoslav government when they were fighting the VMRO of Alexandrov, and now also this Protogerov faction of the right-wing VMRO is sometimes supported by Yugoslavia in their fight against
the other bastard.
Yes.
Mihailov.
So this is the period where Mihailov also forges his relations with the Ustasha movement, which is founded in 1929. We talked about this in a separate episode. The Ustasha movement comes out of the Croatian nationalist party called the Croatian Party of Rights, or their more extreme nationalist wing, which was called Frankovci. And out of that, after the King Alexander of Yugoslavia installed his dictatorship in 1929, they go abroad and basically find a new terrorist organization called the Ustasha. And this group now makes an alliance with this Mihailovist faction of the right-wing VMRO, because they need that, because they don't have any experience. They want to be terrorists, but they don't really know how to terrorize. So what VMRO supplies...
VMRO really shows them
well, they know how to do it
quite well, I mean, like, they brought in just a couple of those guys to those Ustasha camps, and they really showed them what's what, you know?
Yeah.
Well, they tried, anyway. Yeah.
They send instructors.
Terror? I love terror.
They send a lot of instructors to train Ustashas. He met previously with Pavlic. He met him in Sofia, and he met him also in Geneva. There are photos of them together from these meetings. You can find it. The end result of this cooperation is the assassination of the Yugoslav king in Marseille in 1934, which was done by this VMRO instructor of the Ustashas called Vlado Chernozemski, who was supposed to just train Ustashas to kill the king, but in the end he did it himself. And
if you listen to our Ustasha episode, the reasons are obvious.
Yeah, if you want to get something done, right? You know.
Don't ask the Ustasha.
Call VMRO.
So a bunch of these people, they basically create the Ustasha organization in a way, these VMRO instructors. And you can see a photo of this Vlado Chernozemski wearing an Ustasha uniform in the 30s in these camps where he trained them and so on. But another thing happened. There is another coup d'etat now in Bulgaria in 1934.
Okay.
So I didn't go into too much who this coup d'etat was against. It was against a government led by a popular bloc which has a lot of parties in it, which are called Democratic Party or something like that. So I guess there are some kind of centrist government. And basically, the coup d'etat is led by the same structures as the first one, which was in 1923. It is this military union, but also another group that kind of came out of it, which is called Zveno, which is now like a proper kind of proto-fascist militaristic organization. And a third group, which is led by a guy who became the prime minister after the first coup, who is now the head of a party which is called a National Social Union or something like this, and it's named like because he's inspired by Hitler.
Okay.
Great.
So they come to power and they have a new prime minister called Kimon Georgiev. By the way, this is interesting now. Okay, this is the group of people.
But wait, there's more.
I'm with you.
Yes, they have all kind of reforms, like kind of a corporatist system in economy and so on. It's obvious where is this going. They banned the Communist Party and all revolutionary groups. But what do they else do? They start having formal diplomatic relations with the Soviet Union. They want to ally Bulgaria with Western allies, especially with France. And they know that Yugoslavia has good relations with France, and they want to do it through Yugoslavia, and they want good relations with Yugoslavia. And they now also have this some of them pro-Yugoslav politics, and they say that maybe it wouldn't be such a bad idea if eventually Bulgaria becomes a part of Yugoslavia.
Damn.
That's quite an about face.
Yeah, and so this guy who becomes prime minister, as a result of this coup, who's the head of the Zveno organization called Kimon Georgiev, he is later a high member like of a Stalinist government after the Second World War, and he remained so until at least the 60s or something like this. As a guy who was in his past, basically a fascist. But
he was just like, I can still kill people though, right?
Yeah. I mean, a fascist who banned the Communist Party, but made relations with the Comintern and the Soviet Union, which is like what really matters, I guess. So the banning of the Communist Party came as a part of their idea to ban all like revolutionary organizations, and one of them was VMRO, headed by Mikhailov. And they're really serious about it, and they basically destroyed this para-state headed by VMRO now, finally. And after that, Vancho Mikhailov leaves Bulgaria, and he's abroad. And his organization really doesn't exist anymore in Bulgaria.
But I found out that many years later, someone would name a knoll in Antarctica after him. And there's whatever.
Oh, cool.
What's his other name? Radko, right? Something like this? Ivan Radko Mikhailov, he was also called, apparently. And there's Radko Knoll on Rugged Island. He's sometimes also called Vancho Mikhailov. Yeah.
Okay.
That's him.
Yeah, Bulgarians have a surprising presence on Antarctica for some reason. I don't know
They
if
have
you guys
a
knew
knoll.
this. No, they have a couple like bases and shit down there.
Really?
Whoa, all right.
Yeah. Or they did back in the day, yeah.
Okay. This is, for now, we're now leaving this Vancho Mikhailov and his crazy right-wing para-state called VMRO, and going back to the left-wing VMRO. So we said, okay, some of them had their own kind of federalist VMRO organization and all kinds of groups like the Macedonian Federal Organization, Ilinden Organization, and so on. They had this attempt to make one big VMRO, which will be supported by the Comintern, and created this May Manifesto in 1924, which failed. But now, in 1925, they start their own VMRO, which is called VMRO, and called VMRO Obedineta, which means the VMRO United. It's called like that. It's founded abroad in Vienna, and it's called like that because they want to realize this, what Comintern suggested to them, to have a united Macedonian National Revolutionary Organization, which will be their movement, and no other should exist anymore. And this is basically what the point they make. It doesn't go that well, as we'll see. So their politics is basically kind of the May Manifesto in some ways, not completely. So they, as we said, they want an independent Macedonia, which will be a part of the Balkan Federation. They themselves want to be a part of the Balkan Communist Federation of Communist Parties. And they recognize Macedonia as a multi-ethnic region. This evolves through time into recognizing Macedonia as a separate nation by them, which is also influenced by Comintern, who in 1934 recognizes, the Communist International recognizes Macedonian nation as a separate nation for Bulgarian one. So their politics evolved from seeing Macedonia as a multi-ethnic region into a region where separate Macedonian nation and language exists. And this is especially so they also have, although they want to see themselves as the only and final incarnation of like a Macedonian Revolutionary Organization, they immediately start having their own factions. So they split into a communist faction, which is those are members of the Communist Party of Bulgaria or Yugoslavia or Greece.
All right.
Who are moving more into what Comintern says should be done, and they are the ones who in the 30s really adopt this idea of a separate Macedonian nation. And then there are the other ones who are called the Federalists, who are not exactly like members of the Communist Party, who are left-wing socialists, but have their roots in the older kind of more left-wing VMRO politics, which they want a separate Macedonian state and to be a member of Balkan Federation, but still have some attachment to their Bulgarian identity, some of them. So they have like people in there like Panko Brashnarov, who is like the veteran of the Ilinden uprising, and a guy called Pavel Shatev, who is interesting because some of these people have even anarchist roots, as we mentioned. So Pavel Shatev was a member of a group called Gemiđije, or the bombers of Salonika, who they have their own kind of history that goes out of a group from the 19th century, which was called the Geneva Circle, which they call themselves something like, let me check. They call themselves like Macedonian Secret Revolutionary Committee / terrorists.
Yes, I was like that.
Yeah, committee / terrorists.
Yeah. So out of them, this group in Thessaloniki comes, where this Pavel Shatev is one of the members. So they decide to bomb a French ship, and they destroy it. They also bomb an Ottoman bank and a train headed from Salonika to Istanbul, all in attempts to kind of make the world notice the existence of the Macedonian question or something like this.
Like a passenger train or like a commercial?
I'm not sure. I think there were no civilians killed there, or maybe no one killed there.
In it,
but now this guy he's a member of this kind of federalist wing of the United VMRO, which is aligned with.
I should also just mention just the aftermath of the bombers of Thessaloniki was that basically the Ottoman state deported Slavic-speaking people from Salonika like completely. I mean, they like removed them from the city and from the surrounding region because they feared that they would revolt or whatever, and so that actually drastically changed the demographics of the city as well. So it was like some serious consequences to that.
So one of the differences they had in the beginning from what was proposed in the May manifesto, which was more controlled by the communist parties, is the May manifesto said how they are against the new organization that never came to be, is against Serbian, Greek, and Bulgarian imperialism, and also against assimilationist politics of all three, like national bourgeoisies. But now this new VMRO United says that they are against also Bulgarian imperialism and Greek and Serbian, but they only say that they are against assimilationist politics of Serbs and Greeks. They don't mention Bulgarians in that sense, which I guess because many of them do see themselves as Bulgarians. So they are supported by the Comintern. So the Bulgarian and Yugoslav and Greek communist parties are kind of made by the Comintern to support their politics, and they go closer to this idea of a separate Macedonian nation. So that becomes official kind of communist politics at the time. The VMRO United in Yugoslavia have relations with the Croatian Peasant Party. So at the same time, when the right-wing VMRO forges relations with the Ustashas, the left-wing VMRO forges relations with the Croatian Peasant Party, with the idea of like running in elections on their list in Yugoslavia, which doesn't go through, but some like Macedonians individually do that. Some even prominent ones are candidates of the Croatian Peasant Party in the elections in Yugoslavia. They exist also now in all three regions of Macedonia, but they kind of are completely suppressed when the Metaxas fascist regime comes to power in Greece. So they're more or less destroyed there, and they are also pretty much repressed or destroyed in Bulgaria before the coup d'état that destroyed the Mihailovist VMRO. Mihailovist VMRO, they really terrorized the left-wing VMRO United together with the Bulgarian cops. So they really kind of destroyed them there. Especially after two members of the VMRO United got elected to the Bulgarian parliament in the elections on the list of the Bulgarian Communist Party.
Okay.
So this is kind of what was going on there. So maybe I would move now and close with what kind of fucked up things happened during the Second World War.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. I mean, I will be brief.
Always a cheery place to go.
Yeah. Let's hear what these people do in open warfare on a vast scale. Yeah.
I mean, this will be very brief, maybe surprisingly brief. I think this was a lot, so yeah.
I mean, it is a lot, but this was a very efficient telling of an incredibly complicated tale.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, I was making notes and then notes from my notes until I kind of distilled this into this form.
That's about right. Yeah.
So, what exists during the Second World War in the Greek area of Macedonia is this organization called Ochrana, which is a collaborationist paramilitary, like a pro-Axis one, organized. So, Macedonia is occupied by Bulgaria, but western parts of it are occupied by Italy and are kind of part of this greater Albania controlled by Italy. But most of Macedonia is controlled by pro-Axis Bulgaria, and there they organize these Ochrana kind of paramilitary collaborationist units, which are allied with the Axis and consist out of right-wing VMRO people as well of Bulgarian army officers. After Italy surrenders, of course, they work closely with the Germans. So, but Vancho Mihailov, the leader of the right-wing VMRO, during the war, he's living in Zagreb, in the capital of the independent state of Croatia, with his friend Ante Pavelic there. But in 43, he goes to Germany and he visits the headquarters of the SS. And what he wants to organize his own detachments of like VMRO, volunteers, which would be under the wing of the SS. And in 44, they send him to Macedonia with this idea of doing that and also organizing a Macedonian collaborationist state, which they want to name the independent state of Macedonia. But so 3 detachments of like these VMRO volunteers, like 3 battalions, are organized apparently. But when Vancho Mihailov goes there, he kind of sees that it's pretty much over because Bulgaria in 44 really switches sides in war and declares war on Germany, and Italy is already surrendered. So he doesn't want to declare this state because he knows it's over, and Germany really already wants to leave the region, and without them they can do shit there. Right. But some stupider VMRO right-wing people actually do that in September of 44, and they proclaimed this independent state of Macedonia. But what happened earlier is more significant. And so the partisan movement kind of was slow to take off in Macedonia, possibly because of these complicated reasons of, this is a Bulgarian occupation. Before that, there was like this kind of Serbian dominant one. Well, what is worse really, what's going on there? Many people do have a Bulgarian identity there and so on. But this really kind of changes in 1943 when the Communist Party of Yugoslavia sends their operative there called Svetozar Vukmanović Tempo And by that time, there are like a Macedonian communist cadre in the Communist Party of Yugoslavia, and together with some older left-wing VMRO people, they really start off the partisan movement there in 43. And not only that, but they start the Macedonian Communist Party as a part of the Communist Party of Yugoslavia. And the result of that is that in August, so a month before these assholes proclaimed this independent state of Macedonia, this movement proclaims in August of 44, they proclaimed the existence of People's Republic of Macedonia as a member of the Yugoslav Federation, and they form a partisan-led government, which is called ASNOM, which is short for the Anti-Fascist Association for the National Liberation of Macedonia, and which is a part of the larger Yugoslav federal government called AVNOJ, which is now recognized even by the Western allies as a legitimate government of Yugoslavia, as we discussed before. So basically, there you have it now. There a kind of a Macedonian state exists, and the official policy is that there is a separate Macedonian nation that speaks a Macedonian language, and this will be the basis for the new republic as a part of the Yugoslav Federation. But at the time, there is also a plan to actually form the Balkan Federation, which was always a part of the program of VMRO. So after the war, there is this blade agreement between Tito and Bulgarian leader Dimitrov about the formation of a Balkan Federation, and Dimitrov agrees there for Bulgaria to give up on this part of Pirin and to attach it to the future Bulgarian Republic, the future Macedonian Republic, which will be a member of the Balkan Federation, and to recognize Macedonians as a separate nation from Bulgarians. The Communist Party of Greece, which is not in power and is waging a civil war, but they also agree to do the same thing, to support this idea of Macedonian nation. And when this first conference of ASNOM happened during the war, they played or sang the anthem of VMRO there as their official anthem, and also they proclaimed it to be the anthem of the new Macedonian Republic. Wow. This didn't really work out well. So immediately in 45, there is something which is called a Bloody Christmas, which is not a good sign. So this is the start of the campaign where the Yugoslav government wants to get rid of all people which they consider like kind of Bulgarophiles or supporters of the greater Bulgarian chauvinism, as they call it. So a lot of these people are, collaborationists or like people who supported this right-wing Bulgarian expansionist politics or were members of the right-wing VMRO and so on. But I guess many of them were just people who identified as Bulgarians or were suspected of something like this. I mean, this is a period when Yugoslavia is an ally of Bulgaria and plans this federation with them, but they are not doing it in the name of Serbian nationalism. They don't want to make these people into Serbs. What they want to do is to make them into Macedonians. So this is like a part of that politics. You cannot really be Bulgarian or especially claim that Macedonians are Bulgarians. So hundreds of people are killed, thousands are arrested, and things even become more complicated after 48 when there is the split between Tito and Stalin. So now this whole story of the Balkan Federation is over because Bulgaria is a part of the Eastern Bloc and Yugoslavia is not anymore. So this will not happen. And now even some of the left-wing VMRO people who were a part of the partisan movement and who headed ASNOM, like they were the president and the vice presidents of ASNOM were these people, including like the guy that I mentioned, Brashnarov, who was the veteran of the Ilinden uprising. He was the president of ASNOM, and then the guy Pavel Shatev, the bomber from Thessaloniki, it was I think a vice president of ASNOM, and other people there. Like one prominent one was called Metodia Andonov-Chento, who was basically kind of the leader of this government. They were not into this because they supported this because they wanted Macedonia to be a part of the Balkan Federation. Now there will be no Balkan Federation. It will all be only Yugoslavia, which is a federal state, but this is not really what they wanted. And they also wanted closer relations with Bulgaria. So they are now also suspect and many of them are arrested, although they are in old age, and they die in prisons or get sick and die in home like arrest or something like this. So,
but even within one of the root causes of the Tito-Stalin split was the continued support for the Greek communists during the Civil War, right?
Yeah.
And many of them, especially in Macedonia, in the Greek part of Macedonia, were Slavic-speaking fighters who were, fighting for this federation that never happened.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, this is basically it. But, so Macedonia is formed as a kind of a state inside of a federal state, at least from this part that was initially a part of Serbia and then of Yugoslavia. The parts that are in Serbia, that are in Bulgaria or Greece, were never attached to it. The Communist Party of Greece switches again its politics to not recognizing Macedonians as a separate nation, and they consider Macedonians living in Bulgaria now again as Bulgarians. The same happens in Greece. Like today, the Greek Communist Party is one of the most anti-Macedonian kind of nationalist parties there. Mm-hmm. They were they were one of the leaders of the demonstrations that happened there after the Syriza government recognized the name of Northern Macedonia for the Republic of Northern Macedonia.
For people that weren't paying attention to the news then, these were massive protests throughout Greece of Macedonia doesn't exist, or the independent Macedonia.
A big thing for Greek nationalists is that they don't want to recognize the name of Macedonia to this state.
And it's the home of Alexander, right?
Yeah.
They call it. They just call it Skopje. Like they call it the name of the capital. They call the whole country that. Yes, you have come from Skopje.
I see.
Doesn't matter what part of Macedonia you came from.
Yeah, Greek nationalists have the problem with the name, and Bulgarian nationalists have a problem with seeing Macedonians as a separate nation. They deny their nationality. Serb ones kind of are okay with both of these things, but the Serbian church doesn't recognize the independence of the Macedonian church, which is like everyone in Macedonia who is an Orthodox is a member of the Macedonian Orthodox Church, unlike in Montenegro with the Montenegrin Orthodox Church. This church actually has, people who, like millions of people who are its members, priests, bishops, churches, and everything, but is not recognized by the Serbian church, and this also makes things difficult for them because they cannot be a recognized Orthodox church in the world if they are not recognized. Like the only way they could be if the Serbian church recognizes them, and the Serbian church is being an asshole about it. So okay, that's it. But just briefly to mention again this Vancha Mihailov and his like kind of pro-Axis, pro-Nazi, pro-Ustasha, terrorist, right-wing VMRO. After the war, I don't know almost anything about it, but I think this will be interesting for our future arcs. Mm-hmm. He's living abroad, I think in Italy, but there isn't like a CIA file on him from the 50s that says, well, he doesn't really have any supporters anymore in the Balkans, but he has like a lot of supporters in the States and in Canada.
Yeah, of course.
And they also say he's like a gangster. And he runs his like organization as like a personal like a gang for his own benefit or something like that.
He's perfect.
Yes, exactly. I don't know what they said after that, but I imagine something like that. Yeah.
What a piece of shit.
Yeah.
VMRO is interesting because they were really the trendsetters in the region, right? I mean, they're around for so long, right? They basically, Chetniks come out of that. The Ustashas are come out of that. They get a lot of their symbolism from them. The bomb, the knife that they, Ustashas take their vow on also comes from VMRO. I mean, they're really like an influential group for.
Yes, they are.
Very, very long time.
Kind of neglected, even in our even by us in our arc, I would say. I mean, in some way, they are kind of a quintessential Balkan nationalist group. I mean, this shouldn't sound like it's a good thing, but it's a very bad thing. But they are kind of really central to a lot of things, as you said. Like they're connected to everything.
We hadn't initially planned to do anything on them, and then they kept on coming up.
The name kept popping up in every other episode.
Serbian nationalism, you have to talk about Macedonia. If Ustashas, you have to talk about VMRO. Yeah.
In one way or another, they're a really interesting like group that encompasses the whole of evolution of nationalism, really from the liberal democratic 19th century roots, then to like different socialist, even unfortunately anarchist incarnations of it.
Yeah.
All within their own microcosm. Yeah.
And then like this, it's also clear how, it's also in its example, it's clear how a nationalist movement is always older than the nation itself. It creates the nation.
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes even against its will, as we see here. Like, as a result of a lot of the activities, a Macedonian nation was created, even though maybe that was not even the original idea. So, they're really connected to a lot of things. And as we see in the end with, Stalinist politics and also with fascist politics. And we can at this point only imagine what was their role, in Cold War in the States and in Canada. That would be something interesting to research.
It's also a good reason to email us.
Yeah,
if you know anything about this,
yeah,
let us know.
Yeah.
All right, Ray, great job. I think I get it. Yeah. We'll see.
We should also probably mention that that the name has lived on, right? I mean,
that's right.
Ruling party of Macedonia.
I think two contemporary parties, though, currently have that name.
I think the last government in Republic of Northern Macedonia was VMRO, but now is the Social Democrat. But I mean, this VMRO has nothing to do. It's maybe it has something to do with. It's a conservative right-wing party, which is called it's called VMRO DPMNE, which is the best acronym that exists, which is like, it's 8 letters. The PMNE is
just a word at that point.
Democratic movement, something, because it's ridiculous for a right-wing, right of center party to be called an internal revolutionary organization, I guess. So they had to attach 4 more letters to the name. And
as we've seen, every single franchise of VMRO has had certain additions to the end, so it makes sense that it's gotten even longer as time has gone on.
Yeah. And in Bulgaria, there is a party called VMRO, something, which is like a right-wing, I guess, chauvinist party, which basically their politic is that Macedonians don't exist as a separate nation. Basically, that's it. Which is
and you still see their symbolism, like with football hooligan stuff. Sometimes they fly the red and black flag with the Greater Macedonia or United Macedonia, as in including Thessaloniki and all that shit. So it's still alive. Actually, what was it? A few years ago, when there was unrest in Macedonia, I think it was over the name, right? Mm-hmm. And the parliament was attacked by right wingers. One of these guys was wearing like a throwback T-shirt. He was like the most prominent guy in this like attack on the parliament. Mm-hmm. His T-shirt was like throwback Ustashas VMRO T-shirt.
Whoa.
Like he had like the T-shirt said something like, Croats, Macedonians, brothers forever, and like an Ustasha flag and like a Macedonian one or something like that.
All right.
So that connection still exists in some strange corners.
Yeah. I mean, so Fritz said that he saw an interview. There is an interview with Vancho Mihailov on YouTube with English subtitles. When he's of course, like all old bastards, he lived for a very long time, and I think he died in the 90s. And I think the interview is like from 1990 or something like this. And they ask him like, so do you regret anything that you did? And he's like, no, like what? I mean, I only regret that I didn't like do more for Macedonia or something like this.
I think you've done enough, buddy. No, the guy that I was talking about was Hristo Tatarchev. That's his name, from the old group. It's just it's a quote on Wikipedia. Where they just couldn't figure out what to do about Bulgaria, so they figured they would just shelve it.
Sorry, I misspoke. So the guy, when he was attacking the parliament, was wearing an Ustasha HOS T-shirt, which we've talked about, the armed formation. But there are pictures of him with the flag of Greater Macedonia and Greater Croatia, and it's like Ustasha, whatever. And this is also a funny thing too. So like we talked about the Chetniks origins in Macedonia as well. So there's a picture of these current Macedonian nationalists holding what would be a Chetnik flag, right? Skull and crossbones. It says freedom or death, but it says like, glory to Chernozemsky and like these other guys who were Ustashas, right? It's like a literally a Chetnik Ustasha flag. It's great.
Yeah, awesome.
Hi.
Why not?
So we reached synthesis here with the.
I mean, you have to know VMRO history to know why a Chetnik Ustasha flag makes sense, but it makes sense.
Yes. Yeah.
And
he would have been so happy to meet you for like a second.
Yeah. And I mean, it's interesting, like, this question that we mentioned earlier, like, what did this, like, autonomy, for the ones who are not explicitly about federalism, what did it mean for them? And basically, I think, especially with Vancho Mihailov in the 20s, it kind of involved basically in having his own parastate, what, I mean, he was like a Bulgarian nationalist, but he wanted a second Bulgarian state just because his gang could control it. I mean, that's the essence of that movement, I would say.
Yeah.
And, which is kind of the essence of nationalism, but I guess it's easier to see it here.
Yeah.
But no.
I mean, VMRO is interesting and unique, but it's also not that different from some of the other nationalist movements that emerged in the Ottoman Empire at the exact same time. So, for example, I think it's pretty similar to like some of the Armenian groups, like the Armenian Revolutionary Federation and the like, which also had a vast array of different ideologies, right? Like, going from these left wing to, end up like anti-communist. They didn't have the chance to collaborate, but they probably would have. So I mean, there are like similar groups that came out of the Ottoman Empire at the time. I don't know. I'd love to one day go more into that. It's a pretty neglected topic as well, because some of these Armenian ones also embraced terrorism in the exact same way, right? But then it eventually became this, revenge for the genocide and the like.
Also, VMRO's flag is a red and black flag.
Don't get confused.
But it's not like an anarcho-syndicalist one. It's not. It's divided. The red and black are divided like with a horizontal line. And also they're
it's like a hot dog sitting on a burned bun, if that helps.
Yeah.
Okay.
And their slogan is liberty or death, which is also kind of since the 19th century, since the organization that existed in 1870s. That's the slogan, which was also adopted by Chetniks, but also was an anarchist kind of
sentiment.
So I don't know, and there was some anarchist involvement there. So I don't know where these symbols come from.
The flag is the same as the Ukrainian nationalist.
Yes,
right?
exactly.
The Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists.
Who also like to show the image of Makhno. Don't get
confused.
but that's much later. They didn't do that at the time.
Oh, they meant these recent ones. Sorry,
that's in like the 90s.
Since
the 90s,
yeah.
But the Banderas movement, it also shared some of these same symbols. I don't know where they come from.
Yeah,
I mean, it's a good color combination. I mean, Fidel Castro's 26th of July movement also has the same flag, right? Yeah.
And also Vancho Mihailov kind of looks like Bandera, like has kind of same image. So I wonder if there was some. We'll see that because Bandera's organization, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, was very active in the Cold War era abroad.
Yeah.
And basically is active now, I think, as well. So I wonder if VMRO, the right-wing VMRO, had some connections with them abroad. I guess we'll research that for...
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all.
No.
It would totally make sense.
Yeah.
Guys, I am fucking sick as a dog. Let's the Ustasha curse hit me again. We survived our recording process and all, but it got me. Okay.
Alrighty, if you insist, Fritz. We sit here talking about speculating about Macedonian and Ukrainian nationalist connections, Armenians.
Hey, do you know? Are they in Hearts of Iron at all?
VMRO?
Yeah,
it might be. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it's been a while since I played Hearts of Iron, but
I was wondering.
The Yugoslavia is pretty detailed. I mean, they really got it down. Yeah.
Now, I'm just wondering what the policy tree would look like for the VMRO,
Oh, right. Yeah.
What would that be? All right.
I don't know. Unite Macedonia.
That's it. That's it.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Sorry,
I mean,
did you have some more to say? I mean, I was like half joking.
I was just
about-
thinking how Macedonians in Yugoslavia have this image of being like one of the more sensible people and kind of very kind of mild. I mean, this is the prejudice anyway. Not nationalist, and they got out of Yugoslavia without a war.
Yeah.
In the 90s, and
They had
I think
to be fair, they did in 2001 almost have a war.
almost, but that's an achievement
mean-
for the Yugoslav region to almost have a war and not a war.
I mean, it was like a few days, and NATO put an end to it because
yeah.
it was basically a spin-off of the Kosovo
Yeah.
War. And,
Uh-huh.
But I think many people are not aware of all of this very hardcore history, and it's very. I think there is a whole genre of movies there, like like westerns, but like Macedonian.
Damn, yeah.
yeah.
like because it's appeared since the 1870s until 1930s, and
Oh, it's the Wild West. You're absolutely right.
it is like the wild
It's Shogun's
Southeast.
Japan. Yeah.
No. I mean, you have everything, and the
warring
region is
states.
kind of it's good for a western as well. Like, I mean, how it looks like, and
Absolutely.
It's also one of the primary centers of opium and heroin production in Europe for a long time was Macedonia.
yeah,
Opium
Yeah.
grows quite
Hey,
readily there.
And you know what? Weed's legal there now.
That's true. Yeah,
Yeah.
they legalized.
And they never had a war again. All right.
Don't talk too soon.
yeah, for real. Yeah. I don't want to even open up contemporary Macedonian politics. It's
It is. Yeah, it's kind of the last time I was there, it felt like it was really teetering.
yeah.
There was
It gets
kind
that a
of
lot.
Odd tension. I mean, I guess this is before they made Albanian like an official language now. And I'm trying to find a good, funny way to sign off about VMRO.
Well, I mean, I don't know. This is almost the end of our arc. I think we only.
Oh
have
shit,
one.
you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, this
right.
is the end for the non-subscribers.
That's true. You
Yeah.
made it through.
Yeah.
You heard that, you motherfuckers.
So I guess the real end will be heard only by the real people.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Truly
the real people.
dedicated.
Yeah.
The few, the proud.
Yeah.
Alright.
It's been it's a long arc, I guess. It seems that the next one will be longer. But
Yeah, I'm super excited about it though, because I get to do some episodes again. I'm happy about that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess since this will be the last free one, the next arc is going back across the Atlantic to the United States
That's right.
or to North America. But we'll be back to the Balkans.
yeah,
In
will be.
the arc after that. I
Some
think.
30 episodes.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to hear about North American fascists in the 20s and 30s, then I don't know, you're fucked. You're gonna have to wait months and months. But
And the 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s, I think.
yeah, we're gonna cover some ground.
Fascist America, here we come.
Yeah.
Woohoo!
All right, guys, see you over there.
All right.
Ciao.
Later. Ciao.
Hey there, Fritz here from The Empire Never Ended. This has been one of our weekly free episodes for free people. But for premium people, we also have weekly premium episodes, which you can get at patreon.com/tenepod, TENEPOD, and also follow our various social media things in the show description there. Like and subscribe them. Follow them. Like and follow and subscribe. Follow them. Do it.